our bow blank. We're basically at the starting line. All of the challenging parts of putting this together were really handled in the prior video. There's multiple pieces of wood in here that are made to look like a singular glue up, and it took a little bit of work to get to this point, and actually that's the harder part. Something to look at with this particular bow though, and hopefully you can see it here, and that is that the grain on the white oak backing strip, at least on the top side, it's running out a bit. I mean, we got quite a bit of run out going on here. Now, white oak is a pretty sturdy wood, one that obviously I would not use it in this capacity if I didn't think it could hold up. But we're just going to have to pay real close attention to this upper limb and make sure that we're not lifting any splinters as we go along the tillering process. All we have is just the initial taper, as I did in the tapering jig on my table saw. And this right here would be, this is my lower limb that we're looking at. Here's the upper limb. And then we're only going to file just as deep as we need to file in order to seat our tillering string safely to draw this bow, either into stringing it or just even on a long string and being able to pull it on the tillering tree or tillering stick. And the reason we want to only go so deep as to manage just the string is so that we can then work on one side or the other if we have to as the construction process continues, and be able to favor one side or the other if our string starts tracking off in one direction or another. So when you go with a wooden back, be it white oak or hickory or what have you, we need to ensure the edges of our backing strip are smoothed over really well so that we don't have any room for splinters to lift. And in this case, it's going to be very important that I mitigate all possible lifting of splinters. So if you look at this grain, you can see I've got some pretty significant runoff right in here, right? You can see that, I hope. And then from the side view, and we're just looking at just the backing strip, you can see these points, like right here, it comes to a point, that's an edge of a grain, comes to a point, there's an edge of a grain. So just look at all of those corners that come up. See that? So those are all possible areas for splinters to lift. Now it kind of exists mostly just on that one side. So we got to be real careful that we don't do anything to invite those splinters to raise. So we're going to round over the edges really well, put a glassy, smooth finish on the backing strip itself. Now, we don't want to spend a ton of time involved in this should it decide to just rupture on us. So not looking to invest a ton of time with this, just get it as smooth as I can reasonably get it before we start the tillering process. So here we go. Getting those edges really nice and smooth. So those grain pieces that were coming up to points are now blunted a little bit. And that's the idea. So that they're not going to lift on a sharp edge. Like there's going to have to be more stress induced to get it to lift a rounded edge than a sharp corner. And on initial observation, I would say that this limb over here is bending quite a bit more than this limb over here. I'm expecting some positive tiller because this is my top limb, and it is in fact a little bit longer than the lower limb, but I kind of feel like we're a little out of whack here. Like that's a little too much. And then, in addition to that, this lower limb, I don't know if you can see it, I'm flat on the table right here. As you come up, you can see it's twisting. So not only is it like twisting this direction, it's also running off in this direction. You see that there? So right off the bat, we're gonna have to do a little bit of work on this limb. So what we'll need to do, okay, what's happening here is it's bending more so on this side than on this side. You see that? So it's favoring this edge as it pulls up, and this is like lagging behind, which is causing the twist like this. And so this is the edge we want to take material off of right here, okay, to get it to come back and favor back again and straighten out. So two things we can do. This actually plays to our advantage, our extreme advantage, as a matter of fact. We're going to go ahead and take some material off of here right quick, see if we can't get this limb bending a little more evenly, and at the same time it's going to weaken it just a little bit. And we may perhaps be able to get ourselves at a good brace height, straight limbs, and able to let this thing sweat in before we start tillering in earnest. Here's a quick secret for removing wood on a flat belly. You take a more aggressive file. Here I've got my double cut bastard going. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to evenly take off wood down the entire limb to within like the last, 5 or 6 inches of the tip there. And what this does is it really roughens up the belly, right? And you can feel it. And I need to favor this one side just a little because that's where our twist is occurring. And what it'll do, as I mentioned before, it'll roughen it up. Now, if you're dealing with a stave type bow or a thicker wood or something like that, you could do this with like a rasp. Go over it with a rasp, and then come back with a finer file, and where it's rough, you just take that rough spot out now with a finer file, and you're back to smooth. Right? And so what this does is it makes it very systematic in the way that you're removing wood. You go rough, smooth, rough, smooth. Now you know you're taking it off evenly down the length of your limb. So, all right, so we're set to about 1/4 inch of positive tiller. Kind of tracking the bending of the limbs. We're pretty much even on both. Still got a little bit of twist that I'm working with on what would be the lower limb over here. Not nearly as bad as it was, however. So not only did I take some material off the offending edge, but then while it's in the clamp, kind of manipulating that string in the direction that it needs to be manipulated to kind of pull the limb out of its twist. Something to be very, very keenly aware of. So I don't know, I'm hoping you can hear this. Hear the tone of the string on there? Sounds like a bass, like a big string bass, which means there's not a lot of tension on this string. Now, Mind you, it's 18 strands. 18 strands is built for a very heavy bow, but generally speaking, I'll get a higher pitched twang on a heavier bow, and this bow is like pulling really quite easily. So I believe, I mean, I already know we're missing the 50-pound mark. Not even sure we're going to make the 40-pound mark. And at this point, I'm going to go ahead and just let it sweat in for a half hour. Just see if anything changes over the course of that period of time. Come back and check it out. But we may... straight out of our half-hour sweating period. Not quite as lively as when it started. It won't jump off the table. Went ahead and ate some lunch and did some other things. So here we are. Yeah, we've got a little more life in this bow now. This bow is definitely in the lightweight range. Not hunting weight, to be sure. I've tillered this bow out to 28 inches. Still got some good life in it, actually, for having been tillered to full draw here. I want to say started straight out of the mold with 5/8 of an inch. When we tapered down the limbs a little bit, it jumped to about 7/8 of an inch. And I am at right about half an inch of setback here at the grip, all tillered out. Problem with that is that it tillered out at about, well, less than 30 pounds at 28 inches. All right, I've taken 2 inches off the tips, off of both of these tips. Not like actually cut them off, but measured in and put new nocks in 2 inches from each end. And so we are now dealing with what was a 68-inch bow and what is now a 64-inch bow. And finding myself in a situation of needing to follow my own advice and just, you know, break the bow early and or get my results. You know, so I'm looking at the bend on the tiller here right now, and the tiller on this guy's looks mostly good. So we'll probably find some fine tillering opportunities when we put it on the tillering stick and then use a gizmo. Now it seems to roll to 24 inches pretty well, and then I can feel it stacking. And that, of course, is because of the short string and wide string angles. So as this string angle right here approaches 90 degrees, when that string angle approaches 90 degrees like that, you are starting to incorporate stack. It has nothing to do with the wood, nothing to do with anything other than the angle of that string. As something's lifting right here on the back, but I don't know that it's a splinter. I can't see that it's a splinter. So we're gonna have to take a look at this string it. I am registering a little bit right here. Kind of like I said, that bottom limb's looking a little stiff. The upper limb did not register any pencil marking at all. So we'll take a little bit off of here. When I'm working down my belly, you guys, I love to use these two tools in combination. So I'm taking off material with my scraper, and then come back after that removal with my handy file here and smooth that section out with the handy file. And what this does is kind of takes any kind of washboarding effect that you may get in the use of your scraper, and it keeps everything really smooth and even. So every time I do a removal with this, I follow it up with this. Back out onto the tillering tree here. Have sanded out the little bit of anomaly on the backing strip, and then took off some material over here on the lower limb. So here was the problem on the top limb. Here's the problem on the lower. So that's what we're looking for here. And if I come back out here to the tillering tree again, I'll come with some oil so it stops doing this. All right, going down to 26 again. I want to exercise it pretty well out here at the 26-inch mark before I keep rolling on. Give that backing a chance to blow if that's what it's going to do. All right, we're pulling now to 27 inches. I'm going to exercise it here for a little bit. Keeping an eye on those limbs. All right, exercising in at the 27-inch mark. About 31 pounds. Just making it to 28. See what we're getting in the way of weight reading down there. About 33 pounds. And no additional lift on that spot on the back. So I think that's a non-issue for us. So at 28. And I've overdrawn it here a couple of times. Hit 29 there. So at 28, and call it 32 pounds. And now comes the peak and tweak. I mean, see how much we can draw out of this guy. We'll put a real low stretch string on it or something, or just do all the tips and tricks we can think of to get a fast moving arrow out of a lightweight bow. We took 4 inches off the tips of this bow. I went ahead and cut off that extraneous tip material. So we went from 68 inches, showing 5/8 of an inch reflex straight out of the mold. Cut 4 inches off of the tips, made it 64 inches tip to tip, or not tip to tip, but knock to knock, and retained, I mean, setting on edge, almost perfectly flat. So here you go. Here's the long view of it sitting, and you can see how the limbs themselves actually reflex a little bit over the course of the length of the bow. So we'll add a few embellishments to this guy before we wrap it up. Obviously need to shape out the grip. We'll put some tip overlays, and in the peaking and tweaking process, may even throw in a little extra perk to this bow. We are on to next week with the peak and tweak. So thanks for hanging out with me this week, guys, and I will catch up with you next week.